So Blender does have a native quad remesher. It's called Quadriflow. Now don't get too excited. It's limited in what it can do, and it's not the most useful remesher perhaps, but we're going to play around with creating this thing in this video. So let's just get into it. So first, I'm going to go to Sculpt mode, dynamic topology, the snake hook, and some symmetry, and pull some shape out here. You get this thing going, smooth it up, sculpt on it a little bit. And so I found that this remesher, it does work, but it doesn't work super well. And it's really good for maybe like primary forms without a lot of extra details going on. So I'm going to turn dynamic topology off, hit Control D, R, use the remesher, hit Control R. I'm going to use the mesh filter, and it's set to inflate. Let's set it to smooth. And if you're like clicking and just dragging to the right, it does smooth a little bit, but you can come down here and just bump up count here real quick if you needed to. Okay. Use clay strips again. I'm going to turn on tip roundness. We're going to get something here that we can play around with remeshing. That's the main goal anyways. And we'll see what it can do. Probably going to lose a lot of the details, but we'll try anyways. I'll turn that wireframe off. And if you use this scrape and fill tool down here, you can set it to plain and normal. And you'll see we can actually just kind of flatten surfaces based off the normal. Or we can hold Control and we can fill and flatten. Kind of a fun little trick, right? Alright, so I'm going to hit Control R again. The smooth tool, by the way, is a Laplacian smooth, so it actually flattens surfaces. Surprisingly, it behaves a lot like ZBrush's H-polish, except you can't go over the edges. You have to go right up to them. You can't cross them, basically. So if you ever wondered how to do things like that, there you go. That's how you do it. All right, so with that out of the way, we got something to look at here at least. Let's quadrify this thing. So this is actually, you see like we have the remesher up here that we're just using. And it's kind of the same deal, except it's in object data properties. There's a remesh section. Okay, if you didn't notice, there's the voxel remesher, which is what we're using, and quad remesh. So we're going to click on that one, and now we hit this button here, and you'll see that we can use symmetry. There's a number of options in here. We can preserve sharps possibly, or preserve mesh boundaries, preserve paint masks, and we can also smooth normals perhaps if we wanted to. Now, the use mesh symmetry is going to still cause problems. We're going to have to do some cleanup with that if we do that, but basically it's going to mirror it or cut it in half, remesh it, and then mirror it. You'll have little holes and things left over. But there's a couple different modes here. So we can do by face count. We can do by edge length, so like the longest edge length of the quads that it will generate. And then also we can do it by ratio. So it will use the actual mesh density, face count here, and it'll do an exact match. Or you can set it to like 2 times the amount or whatever the case, or half the account. So that's kind of interesting. And so what we're going to do is just by faces, we can set the amount here. Now I found that this thing likes to work with lower counts. If you start setting it up higher, it just kind of hangs or it freezes up or it crashes Blender. Just use it at smaller amounts. And the seed here will give you different results. So if it doesn't work out one way, it looks like it about worked out, try changing the seed maybe. Now, if we click OK, it's going to replace our mesh, just so you know. All right. I'm going to click OK, and it complained about something. We'll figure out what that is here in just a second. It needs to be manifold and have all the normals pointing outwards. So we'll fix that here in 1 second. What I want to do is duplicate this first. And I'm going to hide the original so we have a backup just in case. All right, so let's go into edit mode. And so we're looking at the mesh. I have machine tools, and I'm going to use the smart face or smart cleanup tool, which is 3. And you can see it merged something in it. That's all it did. So merge one vertex or something. And let's go ahead and try that again. Should have all the same settings, and click OK, and you can see now it remeshes. It needed to merge first. And so you can see the result we got out of it. It's kind of meh. It's less than impressive, I would say. Let's bring that count up a little bit. Say like 3,000. See if we get a better result. Yeah, so it doesn't do a stellar job. Even if we had marked some things sharp or tried to. Which you could do, by the way. Most people look at this mesh and they get really kind of intimidated by it, perhaps. But because you can grab a vertex and hold control, a lot of times you can kind of click through these areas. And you'll see that this little option down here, we can do it by topology distance. We can kind of change some of these settings and see if they work out better. And in this case, it does not. So it's a little bit of a rough kind of patch to go through. We got to do little smaller sections, I guess. What's interesting about this, though, is if we did Control E and mark this sharp, right? It should influence this thing, theoretically. I don't know if it's actually going to. I'm going to symmetrize it real quick. Use a mesh machine. You can use a mirror modifier. Might have to merge things again, possibly. All right, so let's see if we can get this to work this time. Okay, you see it kind of changed the topology there a bit. So that's interesting, right? That you can do things like that. Quad Remesher, the paid add-on, also does this as well, where sometimes you can mark things sharp and it'll try to follow the sharp edge. So we'll do that again. And let's try remeshing it again. You can see how that kind of helped there, but it didn't do maybe as well as I wanted it to. All right, so we have the big giant gap here going all the way through the model. Generally speaking, what I would do is select one side of it, maybe like these faces, and just pull them over a little bit. Symmetrize it. I think that's going to be a lot quicker and easier to clean up. And you might have to merge some things. Just try it again, pull it over a little bit more. If you can get an edge flow going all the way across it like that, that would be awesome to do this, but I have a mirror modifier on it or something. What's going on here? I have symmetry on too. I'm sure that's not helping. So let's see if that works. Normally you can dissolve things like that, but it's not dissolving, is it? Let's add a loop cut, dissolve, grab the faces, pull them all to the left, symmetrize. Yeah, it's really challenging, huh? Let's just delete all that then. Okay, I guess we can delete it. There you go. Yeah, so it doesn't quite do exactly what you probably thought it was going to do, so it's a little bit challenging to utilize. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is. Now, is there a best case use scenario for this thing? This is pretty much it. Like, I couldn't find a better way of using it. Maybe other people have, but I certainly I don't think there's much more we can actually accomplish with this thing. So it's good for just converting maybe like a scan data into some quads or whatever, a base mesh into some quads. And so what you'll end up doing with something like this potentially anyways, is you create like a primary form that you want to maybe sculpt on. You might add something like a multi-resolution to this. And now you can actually subdivide it with the multi-res so you can actually sculpt on it like so. Okay, now it does have some poles it generates, which isn't too bad, but you see it's looking okay-ish. All right, so if you are sculpting in Blender, by the way, if you go to Preferences and Navigation, you can set it to trackball instead of turntable, so you can actually spin it, kind of like you're in ZBrush or something. All right, but yeah, there's a couple little rough spots in here for sure. Those poles are definitely one of them. So regardless of that, let's go ahead and just sculpt a little bit more. Turn this thing off and see what we can kind of do here, I guess. With the higher resolution at least, we'll turn symmetry back on. Yeah, you could smooth some of these out perhaps, or flatten them, should I say. Poles are usually better off if they're flat, not curvy. Okay, especially the end poles, which I think that one was. End poles are as a single vertex with 3 edges coming out of it. E-poles are 5 or more. But you can see we can go around and we can kind of sculpt on this and tighten it up. And so that's Quadrify in a nutshell, pretty much. Or Quadriflow. That's kind of how it behaves. It's so not overly useful, but maybe still useful to some degree. Especially if you want to sculpt on something. And you just need quad mesh so you can use a multi-res. Because if you take your time with this and you create a really nice sculpt and you start pushing the geometry quite a bit here. Like you can see, we can go through, we can smooth things out perhaps, kind of work the edges. And eventually what we can end up doing is baking from this thing. And because it's such a simplified mesh, we should be able to even have a decent time unwrapping it. So that wouldn't be a big deal. All right, anyway, so there you go. That's Quadriflow in a nutshell. The rest of the video, we're just going to be playing around with this sculpt, see what we can get kind of accomplished. We might try to bake it too. Just so play around with that. Yeah, see, we can go in there and smooth it. We can use that scraper if we wanted. Which is awesome. In my opinion, I like that flattening tool like that. It's quite useful. The other scraper, okay, so this is a scraper. It's a scrape and fill. This is a fill and scrape. This one's actually different. It behaves different. You don't really have to change nothing here. I just set it to scrape first instead of fill. I end up using the scraper more than the fill tool, perhaps. So, we can turn the strength down on this one maybe and just kind of do single strokes around and get it, cut up some faces here. Do at least a degree, and then maybe we can hit it with a smooth after. The smooth you can always drag up and down in strength as well. Maybe put the layer tool to use. If you never use this thing, set it to negative. You can change the height by right-clicking. And so this has what's called persistent base, which is quite good as well. So you can set persistent base, click on that a few times, and you should be able to start somewhere else and then combine like so right there. So if you hold control, it will go in the other direction. So if you did something too much per se and you want to hold control, you should be able to bring it back. Fortunately, sometimes you might end up losing that, and you might have to, like, if you restart Blender or something, it might not work out anymore. But overall, it's going to work while you're working in Blender, at least, for the most part. You can make some kind of clean, tight sculpts, perhaps. Okay, let's see what happens. This now, all right? So here's where it gets fun. Without... Okay, it's a nice little edge going, or whatever going through there. Anyways, so with this off, this is what we're looking at, right? This edge is driving me nuts. Which edge is this? It's that one, I guess? No, there's another one in here that's not connected to nothing, I don't think. A weird issue. Okay, so with this on, this is what we get. And with this off, this is what we get. Okay, so it does fluctuate the geo quite a bit. So if we want, we can do something like apply base. You can see it's a little bit closer matching now. It's a pretty rough model though overall. So what I would probably do in this case, first, I'm going to mesh filter and smooth it a bit, just a tiny bit, see if it helps it. If it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Some places you might want to focus the smoothing so we can use the mask tool. And like maybe only in this area we want to smooth a little bit more. So the mask tool by default is actually pretty good. Just turn the strength up, and I think it has a nice soft fall off to it already as is. Just don't want to mess that edge up there up. Okay, and so use the mask menu, hit A, get it invert it. Use the mesh filter, set it to smooth. Click and drag right, let go, and you can change the amounts here real quick. I'll get rid of some of that nonsense in there anyways. Press A and clear the mask now. So you can see it does in fact kind of do this number though, so it might look okay, but you might want to go back through this with the smooth tool, lower strength perhaps. And just try to work it out a little bit so that's a little nicer on these edges. See? There's a little bit of artistry involved with the sculpting here in Blender. You got to know the tools a bit and know how to customize them quite a bit. But it is capable of doing some base mesh sculpting for the most part. And you can certainly try to use this on higher resolution mesh as well. It's never going to be quite ZBrush, but overall it's not bad. Too bad of an experience once you get the hang of it. Okay, and so there we go. We got all that done. Well enough anyways. So here's the thing. The shape changes quite a bit. We could apply base, and you can see it's just going to be so-so. So what I would do with something like this personally is I would duplicate it. And we don't need the multi-res on the duplicate. This is going to be a lower res mesh. We possibly could take this one, add a shrink wrap to it. Okay, so shrink wrap, you set it to project, set negative, and you can eyedrop the original that we're sculpting on. Okay, and then we can shrink wrap to it basically. So it'll be closer matching basically. You see how much it changes? And the normals look a little bit better perhaps as well. That'll help it keep from making too many gradients. If you want to subdivide it even one time, maybe it's a quad mesh, you can. And then you can shrink wrap it afterwards. You see? So that's a possibility. You can get away with something like that, possibly. Not too bad. So a 12,000 mesh versus a 240,000 face mesh. So not too bad of a trade-off, I would say. All right, now that means we would have to do a high to low poly bake, possibly. So the thing here is that while this one, it is a multi-res, right? So when you're doing a cycles bake and you're baking from multi-res, you see, there's an option for that. You can do normals and displacements this way if you wanted to. But you lose the ability to bake anything else out anyway. So sometimes it might be beneficial, but other times it might not be. And also because it does fluctuate the shape a little more than you probably want it to, then it's actually not that great either because you're going to have gradients in the normal perhaps. And it might not be what you want. So with that in mind, high to low. And so this one is the high. We will do shape underscore high. The names here do matter. So got one. This will be shape underscore low. We have to unwrap this thing. And so to keep this simplified, I'm going to turn these off real quick in edit mode. You'll see that we don't have predictable edge flow here. Matter of fact, we got like crazy loops and stuff happening. So in this case, I would say just splitting it down the middle might be a valid option even. All right, so if you're going to do a low poly for a game, you would probably want to manually retopo it with a low poly. Not do this here, but this might be just a quick thing you can do for concept art and stuff like that. So just quick renders. Splitting it down the middle, valid, okay? The reason why is because when you select all this, press U and unwrap it, after marking the seam there. This is what you get. You get an egg shape almost, right? If you check this with a checker map, using the text tools add-on here, we'll see that it, for the most part, is fairly predictable unwrapping. Right here, it's a little bit stretched. You can actually check stretch as well. Using this drop-down, display stretch by area. So you can see we got a little bit of stretching occurring. Let's grab this whole thing, and then go back to the menu here, if I can get back to it. Now we can do minimize stretch, and jump up to iterations perhaps, or the blend as well. And see if it'll help it out. And it's not guaranteed that it will. Maybe if we do enough segments, it will. Or iterations. And sometimes it actually causes distortions and it looks bad, so you got to be careful with that thing. But for the most part, it's as good as it's going to get. We could add an additional seam somewhere, and it would definitely help it out. Let's just do one all the way down here at the bottom. We'll try to cut this going up. Let's get rid of this material. I don't want to use that right now. Yeah, we'll cut on this seam going up here. Or down here. There you go. It kind of wraps to this side here. I want to kind of go on the top though. More like right here on this one. Trace it all the way down, back there. Okay. See how that worked out. We could symmetrize this. It shouldn't hurt it at all. So there we go. Can't spin. This is one of the things I don't like about Blender's little spin view thing. It's like really hard to spin it because of stuff like the toolbar in the way, right? One of the only bad things about it. But anyways, we'll re-unwrap that. You can see splitting it like so. If we look at it a little bit closer. It's still stretching, but it's a little bit more relaxed, I would say. And so we could try to minimize the stretch again and make it a little bit nicer, but not much. It's good enough for now, though, I think. A little stretch won't hurt it. All right, so we can turn this one back on. We have a high, we have a low. We're going to use text tools to do the baking. We're going to bake high to low with the regular bake here. And we're going to set this to 1024 and turn on anti-aliasing. So it's going to be 2x. What's going to do is, because we're baking a 1024, it's actually going to bake a 2K, so 2048 by 2048. And downsample it back to 1024, which causes it to have a blending effect, basically, or a blurring effect to it, dithering or whatever. And so it makes it look like it's anti-aliased, basically. So it's like super sampling, more or less, basically. So it's going to bake twice the resolution. If you're doing a 4K, you're going to bake an 8K. If you were to set this to 4x, it doesn't really help it much. The downsampling doesn't do much after that point. So just keep that in mind. And so what we're looking at here is, we need to get out of that. We need to select both of these, come over here. Why is it complaining? What is it complaining about? No, okay. And so the one is a multi-res. We need to apply the multi-res, okay? If you want to duplicate first, hide the duplicate, then you have the original. You can apply that. When you apply this, you want to make sure it's in the viewport, so the preview is on. It's going to be a denser mesh, okay? The low here, we could possibly also apply possibly the subdivision. Now, here's an interesting thing. We're going to put the shrink wrap after the subdivision. We'll subdivide it one time, then we'll apply that shrink wrap. If we were going to subdivide this again, you would add it, okay? And do a one-time subdivision, perhaps. When you unwrap this, take note, there's an option to use subdivision. This is a pre-subdivision, basically. It'll use the modifier, okay, to re-unwrap this thing at a level 1, okay? And so we're going to give it some margin here, too, as well. Okay. So pre-subdivision, you need to do that when you're using curvy surfaces, doing characters and stuff sometimes. And you also need to think about how it's going to subdivide. If you're going to check all, and keep the boundaries, you keep corners, junctions, or just a lot of times you'll just use all or just keep boundaries or whatever. So that's going to dictate like how the UV map itself is held in the curve here, basically, right? I don't know if I've seen it switch there, but let's say keep boundaries. Yeah, it doesn't really matter on it now. I'm going to set it back to all, press U and unwrap one more time. And we can minimize stretch and go through that whole setup again. We'll be okay though for now. All right, so as long as you do that, you can turn it off for the bake. It wouldn't matter. And now you can do the high and the low. You'll see here we have, it says we got 2 highs selected. It figures the low is subdivided, so get rid of that. High doesn't have anything on it. And so it should, yeah, I guess we got a little bit of an issue here. It should be, okay, there it goes, updated. So there's a low, there's a high, okay? The low is the cube, high is the sphere. I'm going to point something out about text tools real quick though. If you were creating a cage, and when you, a lot of times when you're baking, you need to use a cage, you would underscore, call it a cage. Okay, so then you would have high, low, and cage. You see? Or so I thought. I didn't name it right. Okay, so high, low, and cage, right? Which is awesome. But check this out. If you had more mesh in here, say you had some floaters, right? You could tag those as floaters, all right? And if you have multiples, you can do like O1 and O2 and whatnot. And check this out. You now have a little, why does it keep doing that? It doesn't like it. Maybe it's just floater and I got that wrong. Okay, there you go. You see, you have the other one here now, the floater. So you could do multiple floaters if you had like another one. You want to just call that one like floater 02 or whatever. You can see it updates. It should be putting the floater 2 in there as well. I believe it marks as 2 next to it if it does have it, but I don't know. Let's get rid of the first one and see if it still stays. Yeah, it should bake both of those if it was actually there, like it existed. We don't have a cage, we don't have floaters, so we're deleting that. But that's pretty much the setup there for the whole thing. And so the only thing is we don't have a cage, so we use cage extrusion. Basically, what this is, it's kind of misleading, I think, calling it cage extrusion, but it's going to take your mesh and kind of inflate it out. And that it's using the low poly as the cage, basically. So hitting Alt-S, you can do this number. And the low needs to cover the low and the high. All right, that's the main idea of using that. So if I was to push this out a little bit till it covers everything and click, you'll see it's only 0.0238 meters. So 0.023, okay, so 0.024, rounded up. All right, Control Z back. That's an easy way to check what you need to actually set here as far as the value goes. Cage extrusion, 0.024 is looking like the answer there. Ray distance may even be more than that, perhaps. So I'm just going to put 0.3. 0 is technically infinite, but sometimes you get back faces that render and other weird things that could happen. So usually it needs to be near the cage extrusion amount, generally speaking. Okay, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, who knows. But yeah, there we go. So we now have that set up. We should be able to just go over here, click bake. We'll see it takes effect here real quick, and hopefully we get a decent looking bake. Okay, yeah, they should look something like this. There shouldn't be a lot of gradients. There should be just minimal amount of details kind of added to it. You should have your low kind of closely matching your high poly, so you'll get kind of almost like a simplified looking bake almost. So we'll hide the high, we'll take the low, pull it out. We can actually unhide the high, it don't matter. But this new low that we just duplicated here, you duplicate the low, bring it out, give it a new material, set it to metallic, Under normal, click normal map. Color, we can use image texture. Click this here and we can use the normal now. And so we can see how it baked, basically. For the most part, looks fairly predictable, about what we expected. So can bake a high to a low on this kind of mesh. So something you might use for maybe some concept models, perhaps, you know, like I was saying earlier. That might be something you want to check out. So now, of course, the paid add-on Quad Remesher is going to work out in a lot of ways better than that, especially if you're doing multi-res sculpting, which is the whole reason I bought that add-on, by the way, was so that I could sculpt and then take those sculpts quickly, Quad Remesh, add a multi-res sculpt on it, create a rather dense mesh, have a low, so I can just bake high to low real quick, and then go to Substance Painter and add additional details and create concepts. So that's just the whole reason I bought the add-on, but there's other ways I've been trying to find use out of it anyways. So, you know, you can always go back to these two over here, and the low over here, you don't want no material on it for the most part, and the high, no material. So if you were to bake this again, it'll just automatically update over here. You won't have to fight with setting this thing back up again. So if we want to increase the resolution, perhaps, right? Like say we don't want to do a 2K this time, and we can just bake it and let it rip. It's going to take a little while. Blender's baker's slow, and a lot of times it gets little errors in the bake as well that you won't be able to solve here in Blender. But it's good to test it this way. I've been finding myself testing my bakes in Blender using the text tools add-on before I head off to something like Substance, but you definitely want to try baking in other software. And overall, this thing was meant to be subdivided. It was pre-subdivided, remember? So let's add a subdivision to this. Level 1. And I would say it didn't really help it all that much. But also, we had it set to all, I think, right? I don't remember if I had it set to all or keep boundaries, but you need to match it, basically. Yeah, so that didn't really help it all that much. Really wants to be baked to that mesh subdivided by the looks of it. All right, that's interesting anyways. So yeah, there we go. That's using Blender's vanilla Quad Remesher, I guess is the best way to put that. Usable, sure. Not the best tool out there. Maybe not so much. Change the light setup here and see what we can get going on. So that's it for this video, guys. Anyways, hope you enjoyed checking this out. Thinking about maybe how you can utilize some of this stuff in your own projects anyways. So I'll check you out in the next video. Thanks for watching. Take care.